Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Spilling Tea. I am your host, Tiffany Daniels. And, folks, you guessed it, we are once again going through the FDA executive summary for April the 24th, 2014 today. But before we go ahead and get started, just a few quick things real fast. So, first of all, as always, folks, we are going to include this exceptionally long document, as well as the link to the petition to shut down the Judge Rotenberg Center in the description. I'm also leaving in there the video that kicked off this entire series of videos on the JRC and why all of a sudden I am hammering so hard on them, doing one video every single day. So, trigger warning about that video. You will see vivid depictions of a person with a disability being tortured. Also, speaking on that, when going over the JRC, we are going to be talking about some vivid descriptions of the torture of people with disabilities. So if you have young children about, please wear your headphones. Also, apologies in advance if I happen to absolutely mangle any scientific terms or jargon or trip over my words. Please forgive me. It is early morning. I'm still adjusting to going back to a regular work schedule. So just kind of patiently bear with me here, and I would definitely deeply appreciate it. Excuse me. Alright, folks, without further ado, let's pick up where we left off yesterday. We were getting ready to start a new section, which is Section 6. By the way, if you're following along, we are on page 90. It's ethical considerations with particular focus on issues related to clinical studies. This section discusses ethical considerations associated with the use of ESDs, electric skin shock devices, for aversive conditioning for treatment of SIB, self-injurious behavior, and aggressive behavior, for particular focus on issues related to the performance of clinical trials. FDA is required by statute and regulation to consider all available data and information in making a banning determination. However, this information is being provided for panel consideration primarily for answering questions related to considerations associated with performing clinical trials using these devices. Serious concerns have been raised about the use of aversive conditioning ESDs on children and adults with developmental disabilities. Gee, ya think? God, I feel like we're in the stone ages of medical care. As discussed above, in 2010, MDRI published a report appealing to the United Nations Special Rapporteur on Torture to initiate an inquiry into the abusive practices of electric shock and long-term restraint perpetuated against the residents of the JRC, contending that severe pain and suffering perpetuated against children and adults with disabilities at JRC violates the UN Convention Against Torture. An investigation was conducted on two separate occasions by the UN Special Rapporteurs on Torture. The first investigation resulted in a letter to the United States Department of State concerning the treatment suffered by the children and young adults enrolled in the residential program of the Judge Rotenberg Center. A follow-up investigation resulted in a report calling for an absolute ban on all coercive and non-consensual measures, including electroshock procedures as used at JRC, and an addendum determined that the rights of the students of the JRC subjected to Level 3 aversive interventions by means of electric shock and physical means of restraints have been violated under the UN Convention Against Torture. A report by the New York State Education Department in 2006 that evaluated the behavioral program at the JRC concludes, among other things, that the use of electric skin shock conditioning devices as used at the JRC raises health and safety concerns, and that the collateral effects, increased fear, anxiety, or aggression on students resulting from JRC's punishment model, are not adequately assessed, monitored, or addressed. Professional and advocacy organizations in the field of developmental disabilities have issued position statements that are categorically opposed to the use of all aversive procedures, including electroshock, in the treatment of persons with intellectual or developmental disabilities because of the risks they pose to patients. Finally, members of the public and national and state and local organizations have advocated for elimination of the use of electric shock interventions because of the risks they pose to patients, both by picketing and by the letters to the agency. In response to these concerns, the agency is reviewing the available evidence regarding the risks and potential benefits of an alternative to aversive conditioning ESDs for self-interest and aggressive behavior under the regulatory framework governing the FDA-regulated devices, and is considering banning these devices as discussed above. Additional clinical data, such as data obtained from well-controlled clinical investigations, would better inform the assessment of the risks and benefits of these devices, and would be required if an application for pre-market approval were required for these devices. However, in considering the possibility of clinical studies on these devices, the FDA has identified serious concerns regarding the protection of rights, safety, and welfare of any subjects in such a study, and the permissibility of such studies involving children, which appears to be the primary population on whom these devices are used. This section discusses these concerns primarily under the Human Subject Protection Framework for studies involving children under 21 CFR Part 50, Subpart D. It is important to note central to this framework is an assessment regarding whether a device's anticipated benefits justify its risks in the light of available alternatives. So, basically, what this is saying here is, in particular, it is really focusing on whether this is an ethical treatment that they would even want to run studies on, even have young children participants take part of, to conduct these studies, to get the proper data, to get a more perfect determination of benefits and risks. If that doesn't tell you something, I don't know what will. When they are debating on ethics in regards to doing the studies they feel would be necessary to ultimately determine whether or not a ban is in order, that to me means there's a ban that is in order here. I don't know why it's so complicated for these people. It's really not as complicated as they like to make it out. Don't abuse or freaking electrocute kids with disabilities. It's not that hard, Susan. Karen, whatever the hell your dumbass name is, who thinks this is a good idea. Alright, I'm going to see how long this is first. Okay. We're going to cover 6.1, and then I'm going to cut it short because I got another video to do, and I do want a little time before I have to hop on for work. So, 6.1, concerns regarding risk and potential benefit in clinical studies of electric skin shock devices. The decision to use a medical treatment for an individual patient in clinical setting involves a judgment that the potential benefits of treatment justify the risks, and that these risks or benefits are at least as favorable as those offered by any available alternatives. In the clinical investigation setting, this judgment is codified in the FDA regulations 21 CFR 50.52 that provide additional safeguards to children who are enrolled in FDA-regulated clinical trials. For devices such as ESDs that present more than minimal risk, the criteria for allowing a device to be used in a clinical investigation include requirements under 21 CFR 50.52 that 1. The risks of the intervention or procedure are justified by the anticipated benefit to the subjects, and 2. The relation of the anticipated benefit to the risk is at least as favorable to the subjects as that presented by available alternative approaches. In general, the least restrictive treatment intervention that is effective should be used, in this case, to curtail self-injurious and aggressive behavior, e.g. Fox 2005. There appears to be little disagreement that ESDs for aversive conditioning in patients exhibiting SIB and aggressive behavior are a highly restrictive intervention. Therefore, in order for the balance of risk and potential benefits of aversive conditioning ESDs for self-injurious and aggressive behavior to be at least favorable to subjects as available alternatives, as required by 21 CFR 50.52, the use of aversive conditioning ESDs would need to be limited to persons who are refractory to or unable to tolerate adequate treatment attempts of all other less restrictive modalities of treatment administered by appropriately qualified clinicians. This is reflected in the cleared indications for the use of the JRC's GED device, which provide the device should be used only on patients where alternative forms of therapy have been attempted and failed. As summarized in Section 7 below, the agency is aware of no rigorous or systematically collected data that would inform the question of whether a population exists that is appropriately refractory. However, there is some evidence alternative treatments, e.g. positive behavioral supports, along with pharmacological therapy, appear to be effective in some severely affected children and may have more tolerable side effects. Cohen-Livingston, 2002, Horner et al. 2005, Lavigna et al. 2012, McLean et al. 2007, Pace et al. 2005, Rothwell et al. 1999, and Toussaint and Tidier, 2012. Even if a patient population can be identified that is refractory to available alternative treatments, the risks of using ESDs for aversive conditioning must still be justified by the prospect of direct benefit for that population to be approvable under the 21 CFR 50.52. Therefore, the next question is whether, in this refractory population, the benefits of a reduction in self-injurious or aggressive behaviors can be considered to justify the risks associated with the use of the device. And in addition to evaluating the probability of harm from use of an aversive conditioning ESD, answering this question requires an evaluation comparison of the harms that may be prevented with treatment versus the harms that are caused by treatment. Rossi and Nelson, 20 and 12. The FDA literature reviewed identified case reports and case series suggesting the short-term effectiveness of ESDs for reducing self-injurious or aggressive behaviors, but raised concerns due to the lack of long-term effectiveness data and the numerous potential serious risks identified. Even if the device is effective in short-term at altering problem behaviors, there are still questions regarding whether risks are justified given these potential harms. The absence of systematic data establishing the effectiveness of the devices makes the study of ESDs for aversive conditioning more difficult to justify. For all of these reasons, the agency is concerned that the harms associated with the use of ESDs for aversive conditioning may not be justified by the potential benefits, even in the populations that may be considered refractory. Therefore, the agency is concerned that the investigational use of these devices may not be approvable under 21 CFR 50.52. So, basically what they're saying here, kind of what they're covering, and what we'll go more into detail too as we go through more and more in this section, is they're basically saying, first of all, we have to have ethical considerations in regards to whether doing proper clinical studies with the proper controls in place is even an ethical thing to do. Do the potential benefits of the device, that the potential benefits that they can give the children outweigh the enormous risks enough that we are willing to risk it in order to conduct an actual official study on the matter. So far, they're pretty much saying no. What they are also talking about, by the way, is the long-term effectiveness. The fact that, yes, everyone agrees, even those of us who are militantly against this because it's the abuse and torture of disabled people, we can all yet still agree that as far as self-injurious behavior and possibly being aggressive towards others while being shocked, yes, it stops those behaviors. Sure. Just like most abused children will be less likely to do such things because they don't want to be abused again. It's just how it goes. However, what's very telling is the fact that by their own admission, no less, the JRC has literally said that every time they take a student off of these shocks, all the behaviors return. So, what does that tell us? That tells us the problem, the root problem that is causing these behaviors has not been dealt with. And because of that, when you remove these devices, when the fear of harm is taken away from them, then the old behaviors will crop back up because that fear of punishment is taken away. Now, the JRC is like, but that's our point. That's our point. They have to fear us to stop these behaviors. That is archaic. It's medieval. Okay? The fact of the matter is that the fact that in the first place, this concept of causing more physical harm to those who are doing self-physical harm in order to stop them from doing self-injurious harm literally makes no sense. Because one way or another, they're getting harmed. One way or another, they're getting psychological trauma. You know what I'm saying? You can't use these inhumane approaches in order to save people from themselves. It's torture. It makes us fear authority. I wonder how many of these victims now feel like what they feel like every time they go in to see a doctor. I think about that and my heart just goes out to them. How could you ever trust a doctor again? A nurse? How could you trust anybody that has any kind of authority over you after going through an experience like that? I think about that at night. I think about these kids. I think about Andre McCollins every night, even those who managed to get out. And I wonder the repercussions that is going to come from this for the rest of their lives. I'm going to go ahead and close out on that note, and I do want you to think about that. Now, we don't get very many views on this channel, especially on this topic. The few that we do get do tend to get removed from time to time. So please don't forget to hit the like button, hit subscribe, don't forget to hit the comments. Also, don't forget to come back in a few minutes. There's an update on the JD versus AH case I'm going to have posted here quickly. I do appreciate your time this morning, folks, and as always, we here at Spilling Tea hope you have a good one. Bye-bye.